Cory, thanks so much for opening up your studio to us and giving us a glimpse into your mindset as you explore glazes and your work. You know, artists typically spend years learning and developing glazes and using prepared glazes, and they often use the same glazes over and over again because they're familiar with its temperament and they can predict the outpouring, the outcome of these post firings. Yet you call yourself an experimental ceramist. And it appears that there's just a lot of experimentation in your practice. So, what do you mean by this term experimental ceramist into your work? And also, is each firing, therefore, a big surprise to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Um, you know, I assume that other people are also experimental artists, and it just kind of happened naturally where I started calling myself that. But really, what it means to me is that the work is about experimentation. That is what I'm interested in, is the experiment, and that's what I'm after, and that's what I'm chasing. And as opposed to another type of artist that's maybe trying to tell a story or trying to imitate something, or they have they're trying to make people remind them of a certain aesthetic or something like that. And for me, it's just that's not what drives me. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in kind of pushing the boundaries and being a pioneer in ceramics. And so that's what it means to me, is that the experiment is coming first. It's not that I'm experimenting so that I can get the perfect shade of something to then execute different work. It's that the experimentation to me is the work.
Uh-huh.
So I'm really interested in, flamboyant color. I'm really interested in things that are exaggerated and kind of over the top, kind of pushing the limits of what's normal. These
Mm.
bright colors, even, they're not often seen in ceramics being that bright. And also, obviously, the glaze foam phenomena is not often seen. And so doing things that have never been done before, that is of primary interest to me. Trying to find what found out someone else had done it, I would immediately be directing myself in another direction, you know.
Cory, the work almost is subversive to the whole field of traditional glazing. I call you
It
kind of
is.
a part of my confrontational ceramic mode of artists. So these pieces are filled with such color and deep textures and so much movement. And so the motivation behind this work seems to really seamlessly integrate these glazes and these colors and this form. So is that what's exciting you now? Is the possibilities of what these glazes and this technique does for you?
Yes, I mean, I'm motivated by the search for beauty in this ceramic phenomena. You know, like finding that little special moment that is really exciting, and it's hard to even describe why it's exciting. It's mostly because it's new, but it might just be doing something that resonates sometimes on a visceral level. But that's what I'm chasing. I'm chasing this discovery of beauty in phenomena. You know,
Obviously,
and
you're using a certain kind of firing technique, a heat in the kiln. We artists place pieces in a kiln at different locations to get the best effect. So you obviously are using the kiln to place your pieces to your advantage. So let's flip through some more works and tell us how the heat
yeah,
really influences what's happening with the end result.
let me jump a little bit to a photo that talk about that a little bit better. Just jump ahead. So, and it's going to be the piece that you saw at the Azteca exhibition. So
And that's
here's
what
this.
really threw me. Yeah, this piece that I saw at the NCECA in Cincinnati at the annual NCECA show really was just stunning. And when I saw that piece, I knew I had to talk to you. So, so tell us about this piece.
So yeah, I think the question is really interesting about placement in the kiln and advantages and disadvantages. And I think this piece and the image that I'll show you next about how it was fired will illustrate it really well. Where things are in the kiln seems to matter quite a bit. And for this work, I'm playing with a chemical reaction that's happening where the foam is happening. And so I really need to have it happen at exactly the right time. And because every piece is different, I can only fire one piece at a time. So entire kiln is filled with one piece.
Mm.
Um, so this is it hanging in the kiln. This is after it was fired and I just had opened it up. So the technique with this is obviously I have this foaming glaze. I've taken that glaze, I've turned it into clay so that I can make Nerikome patterns with it. And then I'm inserting it into the holes of this inside kind of ceramic structure that you can see inside of there. And then the biggest trick is that I'm firing it hanging upside down. You can see there's a silicon carbide bar passing over the whole top of the kiln, and then it's wired with nichrome wire, a lot of it, and then it's suspended hanging upside down. And as far as placement in the kiln, there's a couple things I wanted to say. One is you can see, if it would have foamed very much more, it might have ruined the kiln. You know what I mean? Like the foam is all coming out, and if it hit those elements, it would probably ruin them. So I have I have to have a larger buffer between my work and the kiln or other pieces than a normal pot would have to have. But another thing that I've really learned a lot is about the mass in a kiln. So you'll see in this photo, there's maybe 6 bricks, and then there's the bar on top. All that stuff in the kiln impacts the temperature that the reaction happens at. If it's full of bricks, it ends up needing to fire hotter to make the reaction happen. Versus if it was a completely empty kiln with just the foam in it, it would happen at a lower temperature. And I think that's mostly because like electric kilns are radiant heat. And so you're heating objects in the kiln. And if there's more objects to heat up, it changes things. But yeah,
What do you
more than
mean
any,
by what do you mean by foam? What is this? Is this in the glaze itself?
well, it's a glaze that has gas coming out during the firing and it expands. Here, I'll go back one more photo so you can see this will help. This is the same piece before it was fired.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so I've made Nerikome patterns with it like it was clay, but then it's in fact a glaze that foams during the firing. And so I started the kiln like this, and then I'm watching through the hole in the kiln as it gets to near the right temperature, and then I had to shut it off at the right time.
What's the bar made out of?
It's silicon carbide.
Ah, and you have a lot of nichrome wire to hold that up. So the pot isn't very heavy, or is it?
The pot is not very heavy, and I have had them fall off before because it was too heavy. Like I've made others that the piece during the firing dropped because the nichrome wire broke. You know,
What I'm
these are the
finding
risks I have to take.
what's that again? I'm sorry.
I said these are the kind of risks I have to take.
Yeah, of course. That's the experimentation that you're talking about and the
Yeah.
research. What intrigues me is that, I've long admired your work as a potter, and you have always made wonderfully exuberant work as a potter. And I thought that you had abandoned it, but you're starting from a pot to begin with on these things. On
Yeah,
these
that was
forms. What a big
yeah.
surprise.
Yeah, there are pots under there. I'm still throwing all the time. I knew you wanted to talk about that. And yeah, I mean, I'm very much making sculpture, but uh, to me, they're all referencing pottery. And it's because I love pottery and it's my background. It's where I come from. And I also think that being a potter connects me to the history of the world, you know?
Absolutely. So, how many years have you been working on this technique to develop this technique?
With the foam, it's been maybe 2 years.
Uh-huh. So show the next slide again. So this is the same pot, the same piece, and now turned upside down, and that just those foam areas just push out onto the
Yep.
kiln. And if it gets too hot, it will completely explode or melt or drip down, and the kiln would be ruined.
Yep.
Got it. So are all of your pieces now fired upside down? This is a technique that you've developed?
They are not. Like that piece the first two pieces I showed, they're fired right side up. And I don't want to be limited to anything. I try things, and I like the drama of this kind of anti-gravity that's going on. There's something really satisfying about the upside down firing. But also I'm up against some practical issues. One is scale. And so you can see this is my kiln, and this is about as big a piece as I can make in here. But I actually have a new kiln coming. I bought a new Freddie Fredrickson kiln, and it'll be here within the next couple of weeks, and I'll be able to probably double the size. And then I might go into making the hanging work at a larger scale. But right now, I'd like to scale up, and because the hanging, it takes extra height. You know what I mean? I have to plan on some
Sure.
extra room to drip. I have to have the bar in there. And so firing it right side up, I can make work that's 10 inches taller. So
So
I've
what's the
been
size of this one? What's the top size that you're using?
this one it's hanging right here. It's
Yeah.
probably it's sold, but I think it's like maybe 12 or 14 inches maybe. And
Mm.
so the kiln here is 20 inches tall from the shelf to the top.
And the new kiln you're getting is how big?
It's it's 36 inches tall
Oh,
and
wow.
24 by 24 wide.
And it's going to be electric, of course, again.
And it's electric. Yep.
And so what is it? What cone 4 is it?
Oh, 04, yeah.
Oh, 4. Okay, great.
Yeah, 04.
So, wow. Do you have any other images of process?
Um, I have a couple other this isn't the foam work. I don't even know if you've seen this stuff, but I'm also doing some like glaze drip stuff. Have you seen this?
No.
So this is clay glaze. It's glaze that I've made into so it can behave like clay in the raw state. And then I'm making Nerikome patterns and then dripping them through these grids.
Hmm.
And so this work is really fun to make, but I found it to be incredibly breakable. Like I can't ship, like I have this piece here. I can't ship it anywhere. How am I going to ship that? So,
Um, um, do you mind my calling yourself subversive? Because you really are going against how glaze is used to protect a pot and that you can eat off of it or you can clean it, all these things. So you're using the glaze in a very sculptural manner, and they become a kind of a kingpin to the statement that you're making. You're one of the few, I mean, I don't know many people who actually work for a glaze and a company like Amoco, which
mm.
which we've known to be in the field a leading glaze and underglaze supplier. So has working for Amoco influenced your practice?
Absolutely. They couldn't be more integrated. I think that both the job and the studio work feed each other. These glazes that I'm using didn't come out of a vacuum. They come because I've learned a lot working for Amoco. The foam glaze specifically, I've learned from working at Amoco. I have a wealth of materials available to me because of this job that are I have everything I could ever need as far as materials go. And I have kilns and scales and mixers and everything because of the job. They really subsidized this and enabled me to do it. But on the flip side, my research into my studio work feeds Amoco also. I'm able to see where there are gaps in what we are already selling as commercial products and think, wow, I think other people might want to use this thing I just came up with, and I can see if I can commercialize it.
You are a scientist in that regard, not unlike anyone getting a grant from the government to research an idea and NIH grant or what have you, that has you
Mm-hmm.
explore an idea and a material to use it to its fullest advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you do you feed back to Amico, or they look at the work, you discuss the results? What is the relationship in terms of what you actually do?
I generally propose new products, new product ideas. We have a, big new product development meeting, and I will bring ideas to the table that I think will be successful. And a team of people in sales and marketing and other people in technical services will all make a decision on, what the best strategy would be to bring new products to market.
Hmm.
So,
So, you probably don't mind then sharing your technique, because you're probably going to have some imitators coming up. Do you mind that at all?
yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing, right? It's a funny line that I have to balance because I don't want everyone to make exactly my work. But yeah, some of it will end up being sold. Even the foam, it has not been sold yet, but we might sell that as a product one day, and I would be fine with that. Would be fine with me. I've had plenty of time with it in advance of everyone else, and even if everyone else has the techniques, art, they would have to be me in order to make my work. You know what I mean? They'll do it different, and so it's
That's
okay.
exactly right. Everyone has their own style of working, and they bring their own innovation to to whatever they're using, and that's the mark of an artist, is it not?
Indeed.
One of the things that I've enjoyed reading about you when I looked at your Instagram and your website, you said that you explore science, culture, and art to create your work. And while I see this glaze chemistry is indeed so rich in with your expansive knowledge of glaze chemistry, how do you see your work fitting into the culture and the art playing a role in your work?
hmm Um, so I assumed that you got that questioning from my artist statement where I mentioned science, culture, and art.
I
But
did.
what I meant by it in my artist statement was that these are gifts, I suppose, that being a ceramic artist has brought to me. It's that being a ceramic artist has taught me about science, culture, and art. Like I come from a very small town in Utah. It's very, very conservative, middle of nowhere place that has no culture and there's no art. And there are no people there who grew up to be artists, you know? And I was very lucky to have a great high school ceramics program. I went to NCECA twice in high school, which is unheard of. And then I decided I was going to pursue a life of ceramics. And it has taken me all over the world. I've learned about the history of the world through ceramics. I've um, I've become an artist, but I've also learned about an incredible amount of art from being a ceramic artist. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? It's mostly just that it's not that I'm researching culture, even though I end up doing that anyway. But the point that I was trying to make is that I am more cultured now. I've learned about the world of art and I've learned about science because I am a ceramic artist. Like chemistry, for like you mentioned, I know a lot about chemistry now. I use it every day in my job. But without ceramics, I don't know that I would have pursued that knowledge. You know what I mean? Maybe a little bit here and there, but not anywhere near to the degree that I do now. And same with the culture and the art. I don't think that if I would have been so enamored, visceral level of throwing and with just getting some pottery out of the kiln when I was a teenager, I don't think I would have learned about, the cultures that I have learned about. I wouldn't have visited the places that I've been. I mean, I spent 6 months in India doing ceramics. I did a residency in Italy. I've been around the world in pursuit of art, and it's been so fulfilling. And I honestly, it's it's like a recommendation almost. People should be pursuing these things to learn about what it is to be human, almost. You know what I mean? Like it has been my stepping stone to learn about what it is to be. So,
Said, very well said. We are all products of where we were born and what culture we grew up in and what we look at and what we read. And obviously, you're very caught up well in the current movement in clay, even though you are demonstrated to be an incredibly skilled ceramist. You're now part of this so-called sloppy clay movement. But, but yours has an edge. It's not really sloppy clay. It's controlled and thought about. It's very contemplative. And as I said before, the mixture of clay form, scale, and the texture and the color, it really is uniquely to yourself, Cory. And the work is really quite exuberant. Let's go on to a couple of more pieces, and that might excite our viewers.
So this piece has some of the latest discoveries in it. I've recently found a way to apply the foam to the pieces without having to have them come out of a hole. So basically, I found a ceramic adhesive so that instead of having to have it lodged into a hole, I could just kind of glue them to the side and they puffed out and did not fall off. And so it's been, this is very new. The last couple of months, I've been able to do this, and I feel like it opens up a lot more possibilities for how the work can be made. Not just relying on gravity.
I spent a good year studying glaze chemistry when I was at Ohio State, and so I know the triaxle blends and all the other things that went into glaze chemistry, but I've never heard of a clay adhesive. So
Yeah.
this is a new language. It's like AI and all kinds of new technologies. So could you tell us what a clay adhesive is?
It's basically a product that I found that is like it's kind of like a refractory cement. Like you could buy a product that would be for refractory cement, but I can't have it be that refractory. And so I've adjusted it a little bit so it's not, under fired. But it's, like, for example, you could just take some sodium silicate and it's like glue,
Mm.
but the sodium silicate melts at such a low temperature that it would turn into glass, melting glass instead of staying glue. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of things that are sticky. You could just use CMC gum and that would be sticky, but you need it to stay sticky. And that part is a secret that I can't tell. But that's basically what it takes is you need something that's sticky and then you need it to stay sticky. While after a lot of things would burn out, a lot of sticky things like CMC gum would burn out at red heat, or 1,000 degrees or something. And so this takes a type of adhesive that isn't going to burn out.
So, spoken like a true scientist and glaze chemist, you know your materials so well, and you're taking advantage of the variable melting points of each of these ingredients, which give the kind of texture, the kind of effect that you want. And that does take a lot of experimentation. So how many kilns have you ruined?
I try to take a lot of risks, but I also try not to ruin my kilns. I've definitely had some pieces fall into the side and ruin some elements, but I was able to scrape it off. No kilns were completely ruined, but I mean, I would say my success rate is less than 50%, probably 30% success rate. But I think I like it at that spot. Like I think if I ever got any higher than 30% success rate, it starts to be less exciting. You know what I mean? Like I think and this is not something I do on purpose. It's not like I'm getting too good, I better throw a wrench in the gears. I don't do that. But naturally, I'm kind of always trying to push myself into the unknown, and that inevitably ends up being.
When I think of people like Karen Carnes, who used salt glazing as a technique in her work and was her signature, and Malcolm, I just forgot his last name.
Davis.
Yes, Malcolm Davis, with his wonderful experimentations in
Chinos.
right, I'm sorry, Chino glazes, and those incredible effects, or artists who developed hairs for glazes. or Temuco kind of glazing. These are all signature pieces. So are you now going to be called the foam maven of glazing? You have this is going to be your signature kind of work that you feel closely excited about?
That's a really good question. I think I'm not sure yet. I think that one thing that I'm still known for, or I think I'm still known for, is doing the Nerikome. I've
Mm.
done a lot of there's still Nerikome patterns on this. I've done some type of colored clay blending pattern making on everything I've made for 15 years, maybe. It's so that is really the through line is the colored clay. And I think that if you remember the old colored clay work that was thrown and kind of twisted on the wheel, that stuff,
Sure.
I in a way, I think it was still very similar to this. I was after the same kind of thing. Like I had to let go and have a little bit of controlled, but still chaos, and I had to be able to kind of collaborate with the unpredictable nature of ceramics. And so this work to me is the same. It's just a different, action.
The Narikomi technique in itself is such a beautiful technique and so intricate. And there have been many wonderful practitioners, Dorothy Feibelman, for example,
Hmm.
in Japan now, and she's been known as a fabulous Narikomi artist. But you've sort of brought Narikomi into the 21st century. And truly, the statement is quite unique. I wanted to ask you, there are so many, and this brings into this whole new wave of technology in clay. There are lots of innovations going on in ceramics with 3D printing, and recently Adam Chow, for example, is experimenting with artificial intelligence, and the whole landscape of what's happening with the glazed surface and with form has shifted. So, what do you think is going to be new approaches to ceramics within the next decade? Do you see other technologies coming in, getting going into the past and reinventing the wheel, so to speak, using your Nerikome as an example?
Yeah. I mean, who can say, right? I wish that I knew, because I'd be the one who wanted to do it first, whatever was going to happen. um, it's ceramics is amazing. I think it's going to go both directions. I think there's going to be new innovations that we can't even imagine right now, where people are going to use technology to do, high tech things and also make art in new ways. I mean, I'm constantly amazed by what people are able to make with 3D printer, you know. Um, but on the flip side, I also see that the whole world is getting more and more technology all the time, more and more automation. I see obviously AI is huge right now and the chatbots and things like that. I think that ceramics is going to always be this thing that people go back to when they want to push away from the technology also. You know what I mean? When they're saying there's too much video calling, there's too much, you know, social media, there's too much this and that where I'm disengaged and they want to just turn off the TV and put their hands in the mud and make something that feels good. You know what I mean? And then make something useful, eat off of it. You know, I think there's something really human about ceramics that people will always want to use as a way to kind of go back in time and to get away from the constant evolution of technology. So I think it's going to be both things.
Wonderful. I think you're quite right. And the pandemic was a good example of how people turned away from television sets and they wanted to touch materials. And I understand
Mm-hmm.
the clay industry, most of the ceramic centers that I know saw an uptick in class enrollment and people coming together to touch the material. Cory, this has been great. Now, could we take a look at your studio? Can we see what you're really hot and what's happening now in your
Sh
space?
Sure.
So you can see this is kind of a a glimpse into my studio. I live on Main Street in Alfred. This is an actual pool table in my studio, but I kind of just work off of it most of the time. But I have some pieces here on the table that I'm going to talk about a little bit. I focus on experimental ceramics. Everything that I make is an experiment, and what I mean by that is that the experimentation is the focus of the work. And so everything you see here, I've taken some kind of risk, or I've taken a chance. And also, part of the work is that I let go of complete control so that I can kind of avoid the work being contrived. I can allow some spontaneity and life into the pieces by kind of collaborating with chaos, collaborating with a little bit of the unknown. So these are some of the more recent pieces I've been working on. Everything you see here that looks like, it's bubbled. So this is the glaze foam that I'm speaking about, and it actually expands during the firing. And so when I made it, it was much smaller than this, and it wasn't so exaggerated and so, puffy looking before. And a lot of the work has been designed so that the foam is going to extrude out of these holes, and it kind of just forces there to be a pattern with the actual foam that's coming out. And some of the other pieces, like this, for example, this is one of the newer things that I've been working on. And these nubby foam bits were applied with a ceramic adhesive. And so that they didn't have to actually come out of a hole like some of the other pieces I just showed you. These pieces foamed up right on the side of a bottle. And you can see this piece that's over here, that's done the same way, where there's a body that's underneath, and I've completely covered it with this Nerikome glaze foam. And so that the form ends up being the glaze. And so it's really interesting to think about form and where the glaze starts and where the form ends, and blurring the lines between those things. One thing that I wanted to make sure I talked about that Judy liked was this kind of hanging foam sculpture here. This I fired hanging in the kiln. I fired it hanging on that nichrome wire right there. And this is just an experimental piece. You can see there's an understructure under here, and all the foam kind of came out of these square holes. But what happened was, it foamed so much at kind of a funny angle. And, this is where it touched down to the bottom of the kiln during the firing. And because of the proportions of the weight, I can't actually stand it here, or it falls over. So it's basically been hanging since I made it. And, I also just really kind of love it. I think it's really a interesting piece, and a lot of really interesting effects happened on it. And I need to keep it around to make sure I remember that something like that could happen. So anyway, I think that gives you a nice little intro to what's going on in here. And, thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye.